There is a specific category of question that bypasses every social defense a woman has built and goes directly to the part of her that makes genuine decisions about connection. Not because it's clever or tricky, but because it does something that almost no ordinary conversation does. It makes her feel genuinely, specifically, completely seen. And the feeling of being truly seen by another person is, according to decades of relationship psychology research, the single most powerful precursor to real emotional and physical intimacy that exists. Most men ask the wrong questions, not because they're bad at conversation, but because nobody ever explained what the right questions are actually doing neurologically. This video changes that completely. Here is the study that started a revolution in how relationship psychologists understand intimacy. In 1997, psychologist Arthur Aron at the State University of New York at Stony Brook published a paper titled The Experimental Generation of Interpersonal Closeness. His team took pairs of strangers, sat them across from each other, and gave them a series of increasingly personal questions to answer together. Not small talk, not surface-level getting-to-know-you conversation, progressively deeper, more vulnerable, more mutually disclosing questions that built on each other over approximately 45 minutes. The results were remarkable. Participants reported feeling closer to their conversation partner after those 45 minutes than to people they had known for years. One pair from the original study got married. The paper went on to become one of the most cited studies in social psychology and generated a cultural phenomenon when the New York Times published the 36 questions in 2015, causing millions of people to try them with strangers, friends, and partners. But here is the part of Aron's research that almost nobody talks about when they reference the 36 questions. The questions themselves were not magic. The mechanism behind them was. And that mechanism, once understood, explains not just why those specific questions worked, but what any question needs to do to produce the same result. It explains the psychology of what genuine intimacy-building conversation actually requires. And it gives a framework for understanding why certain questions open people up completely, while others, no matter how well-intentioned, leave the conversation on the surface. This video covers that framework. 5 categories of questions, each one grounded in specific psychological research, that build genuine connection and emotional openness in a way that feels natural, never forced, and produces something real rather than performed. And I need to tell you now, the 5th category is the one most people never think to use, and it's the one Aron's research suggests is the most powerful of all. We'll get there, but we need to build the foundation first. This is where almost every man gets conversation wrong, and the research is extremely specific about why. Most questions asked in early connection-building conversations are information-gathering questions. What do you do? Where are you from? Have you been here before? These questions are not bad, but they are also not doing anything neurologically significant. They are collecting facts. And facts, in the context of intimacy research, are almost completely irrelevant to the feeling of being seen. What produces the feeling of being seen? The neurological experience of genuine recognition that Dr. Arthur Aron's research identified as the core mechanism of intimacy is not information about a person. It is the experience of having one's inner world, one's perspective, feelings, and specific way of experiencing life genuinely engaged with and valued. The questions that do this are not what happened to you questions. They are what was that like for you questions. The difference is everything. What did you study in school? Collects information. What made you choose that? And looking back, do you think your reasons were the real ones? Invites reflection, self-disclosure, and the specific kind of psychological engagement that produces the feeling of being known. Psychologist Sidney Jourard, whose foundational research on self-disclosure established much of what we understand about how intimacy develops, found that the experience of being genuinely asked about one's inner life and then being genuinely listened to produced more rapid feelings of closeness than almost any other conversational variable. Not the number of questions, not the duration of the conversation, the quality of being genuinely invited into self-reflection by someone who seemed to actually want to know. Questions in this category sound like, what part of your life surprised you most? The good version or the hard version? What is something you changed your mind about completely, and what made the shift happen? What do you know now that the younger version of you would find most surprising? These are not interview questions, they are invitations. And the distinction is felt immediately and neurologically by the person being asked. This next category is the mechanism Aron's research identified as most essential, and it has a very specific requirement that most people skip entirely. Mutual vulnerability, not one-sided vulnerability, where one person discloses and the other listens. Mutual vulnerability, where both people move into less certain, more personal territory together. Here is why this matters at a neurological level. When only one person is being vulnerable, only one person is disclosing personal thoughts, feelings, or experiences, the interaction has a power imbalance built into it. The discloser is exposed. The listener is safe. And the person who is safe, regardless of how warmly they're receiving what's being shared, is not in the same emotional space as the person taking the risk. But when both people are in the space of genuine disclosure, when the question creates an opening for both of them to share something real, the neurological experience is entirely different. Research from Brené Brown's work at the University of Houston on vulnerability and connection found that shared vulnerability, the experience of two people being genuinely open with each other simultaneously, produces the fastest and most durable feelings of closeness of any conversational dynamic studied. The questions that create this are specifically structured to invite his answer as well as hers. Not tell me about your biggest fear, but what is something you've never fully admitted to yourself? I'll tell you mine if you tell me yours. Not a one-way disclosure request, a shared territory. This category of questions includes things like, what's something you've never quite found the right words for about your own life? What do you think you're still figuring out that most people assume you've already sorted? What is something you want but have never directly asked for? Each one of these creates the possibility of genuine two-way disclosure. And genuine two-way disclosure is where intimacy actually lives. This next category is the one most absent from ordinary conversation, and its absence is responsible for more missed connections than almost any other conversational variable. Most conversation is about elsewhere, about the past, the future, other people, other places, abstract topics. Very little ordinary conversation is about right here, right now, what is actually happening between two specific people in this specific moment. Research from Harvard psychologist Daniel Gilbert, whose work on mind wandering found that humans spend approximately 47% of their waking hours thinking about something other than what they are currently doing, established that genuine present moment engagement, the experience of being fully in the current moment with another person, is both rare and profoundly positive when it occurs. People reported significantly higher levels of happiness and connection in moments of genuine present moment engagement than in any other psychological state studied. The questions that create present moment engagement are deceptively simple. They are not about history or future. They are about now, about what is actually happening in the space between two people in real time. Questions like, what is the most honest thing you could say about how you're feeling right now? Not in general, but in this specific conversation. Is there something you've almost said tonight but haven't yet? What are you noticing that you haven't mentioned? These questions are unusual. They will initially catch someone off guard because conversation almost never goes there. But the effect of being genuinely asked about the present moment, of having someone care enough about what is actually happening between you to ask directly, is neurologically distinct from any other conversational experience. It produces the specific quality of presence that Aron's research identified as the hallmark of genuine intimacy. Both people are suddenly, completely, specifically here. This fourth category is grounded in a finding from developmental psychology that most people never encounter outside of academic research. Every person carries what psychologist Dan McAdams of Northwestern University calls a personal narrative. the specific story they have built of their own life, their own identity, and their own meaning making. This narrative is not the facts of someone's life. It is the interpretation of those facts, the themes they see, the way they understand who they are and how they got here. And here is the critical finding. People feel most genuinely known not when someone knows the facts of their life, but when someone engages with their personal narrative in a way that shows genuine understanding of how they specifically see themselves in the world. The questions that do this are questions that reflect back a specific understanding of something the person has already shared and then go one layer further. They show that you were not just collecting information, but actually absorbing the specific way this person thinks and feels. These questions sound like, you mentioned earlier that you tend to approach things a certain way. Has that always been true of you, or did something shift? When you talk about the things that matter most to you, there's something underneath it that you haven't fully said. What is that? What is the part of your story that you think most people don't get quite right? The power here is specificity. The experience of having someone ask you a question that could only be asked of you because it is built on the specific things you have said and the specific way you have said them is the experience of genuine recognition. And genuine recognition in relationship psychology research is the closest thing to an emotional accelerant that human conversation has. This is the final category, and it is, as Aron's research suggests, the most powerful of all. Most intimate conversation, when it goes personal, goes backward, into the past. Into what happened, what was difficult, what has shaped the person. And all of that matters, but the research on emotional connection consistently shows that the questions that produce the deepest and most durable feelings of intimacy are not questions about what was. They are questions about what is wanted, desire questions, possibility questions, questions that invite a person into the forward-looking, openly wanting part of themselves, the part that hopes and reaches and has not yet gotten what it's reaching for. Here is why these questions carry such neurological weight. The wanting self is the most vulnerable self. It is easier to talk about what happened to you than to talk about what you want, because what happened is past and therefore safe. What you want is present and active and therefore exposed. It can be refused, it can be dismissed, it can be laughed at. And when someone asks, genuinely and warmly asks, what another person wants, what they hope for, what possibility they're still holding, even though they've been careful not to say it out loud, the experience is one of the most profound forms of being seen that exists in human conversation. Research from positive psychology, specifically from Martin Seligman's work on well-being and human flourishing, consistently identifies the engagement with desired futures, the experience of having one's hopes and aspirations genuinely acknowledged by another person, as among the most powerful positive emotional experiences available in social interaction. Questions in this category. What is something you want that you've stopped talking about because nobody seemed to really understand it? If the next chapter of your life could look any way at all, what would you be most afraid to hope for? What would you do if you were completely certain it wouldn't be judged? These questions reach the part of a person that ordinary conversation never touches, the wanting part, the part that is most alive and most vulnerable. And when that part is genuinely reached, when a woman feels that someone has asked for her wanting self and received it without judgment, the connection that results is not manufactured by clever conversation. It is real, built from the most honest material available. Here is the unified principle behind all 5 categories of questions. None of them are tricks. None of them are techniques designed to produce an outcome regardless of genuine connection. All of them are ways of creating the specific conversational conditions that relationship psychology has consistently identified as necessary for genuine intimacy to develop: mutual vulnerability, present moment engagement, specific recognition, genuine curiosity about inner experience, and the invitation of the wanting self. The difference between conversation that builds real connection and conversation that stays on the surface is not wit or charm or conversational skill in the performance sense. It is the willingness to ask questions that genuinely reach for the person, questions that communicate, I want to know the specific, particular interior version of you, not just the public presentation. That willingness, expressed through the right questions, creates something that no technique or strategy can manufacture. It creates the feeling of being genuinely seen. And that feeling, according to Arthur Aron, Sidney Jourard, Brené Brown, and decades of relationship psychology research, is the foundation on which every real intimate connection is built. Ask differently, reach further. The conversation changes, and so does everything that follows from it. Now, before this video ends, there is a layer of this conversation that moves beyond words entirely, because questions build emotional intimacy. But there is a parallel conversation happening in every interaction that has nothing to do with what is being said, and everything to do with what is being done physically. The way she holds a hug, whether her arms pull or just hold, where her hands go, whether she nuzzles in or stays straight, whether she exhales. These physical variables are communicating in real time everything her answers to your best questions confirmed. And reading them correctly, understanding what the body is reporting that the conversation never quite says, is the other half of genuinely understanding what she is feeling and where things actually stand. The video on your screen right now covers exactly that. It is called When She Pulls You Closer in a Hug, It Reveals More Than She'll Ever Say. It takes everything you now understand about the psychology of genuine connection and shows you what it looks like when it has already happened, when the connection is real and the body is confirming it through every variable of physical contact. The pull, the nuzzle, the exhale, the duration she controls. Your questions open the door. That video tells you how to read whether she walked through it. Watch it now.